Going to begin. So I'll start with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so I say good afternoon to everybody, or most people, and maybe good morning to others, and good evening to still others. And so we are continuing now with our BGR New Year retreat on the theme of finding stability in a time of turbulence and turbulent time. And I'm going to begin my session with the meditation. And again, this will be a meditation which is intended to help us to establish some stability. And as Aya Dhammadipa did in the morning, I'm going to begin with a sutta. And this is a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. It's the fourth volume of the Samyutta Nikaya, the chapter on the six sense bases. And in this sutta, the Buddha uses a simile of six animals. And he explains how you can take six animals. What are they? The snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey. And you bring these animals together and you release them, and the animals run each in their own direction. But when you take those same animals and you tie them to each one to a leash, and you tie that leash around a strong post or pillar, and then you release the animals, and the animals will pull off each in their own directions, seeking their own type of food, their own feeding ground. But because they're held in place by the strong post or pillar, they cannot get away. And eventually the animals get tired and they sit down or lie down in the vicinity of that strong pillar. And then the Buddha says, what is that strong post or pillar? The strong post or pillar is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. And so we could say that mindfulness directed to the body, mindfulness established in the body, is that strong post or pillar that will enable us to maintain stability in turbulent times. Because what happens when we're exposed to the turbulence of our times, the fluctuations, vacillations, uncertainties of events, this uncertainty registers in the mind, worry, anxiety, fear, yearning, desire, apprehension, and so forth. And those mental states have an impact upon the body. They sort of get registered in the body and recorded in the body, and they simmer in the form of bodily sensations. And so when, excuse me, when we establish a strong mindfulness directed to the body, established in the body, even though we can experience these states of worry, anxiety, concern, fear, apprehension, and so forth, through the mindfulness established in the body, those states of concern and worry lose their grip on the mind. They sort of settle down, simmer down, and lose their force. They become turned into just bodily vibrations, bodily sensations, and then they sort of fade away, and we maintain our calm, our equanimity, our balance in the midst of these shifting worldly events. The turbulence of the time. Okay, so with that, let us settle in for a period of practicing mindfulness of the body. Okay, so the way we're going to do this, first, you take your congenial meditation posture, keeping the torso straight and upright, but not stiff or rigid. You could put the hands on the lap, one hand over the other with the thumbs lightly touching. Or if you prefer, you could have the hands on the knees or on the lap. Hold the head with the nose perpendicular to the navel, mouth closed, and the eyes should be either closed or lightly closed or slightly open if you prefer. I think it's better to keep the eyes closed in this case. Okay, then you can begin with a minute or so just of mindfulness of breathing, mindfully breathing in, breathing out, trying to follow each in-breath, each out-breath as consistently as possible. Okay, now we are going to move through the body part by part. And as I mention each part, what you do is to focus on that part, not in a very narrow and specific way, but just in a general way, and try to feel whatever sensation you can experience in that part of the body. This is different from, so maybe some of you have practiced in the system taught by or stemming from S.N. Goenka. This is not a method of going through the body with a kind of fine microscope and picking up all of the sensations, fragment by fragment, section by section, but just looking in a general way for the sensations that appear in the part that I mentioned. And so we begin with the top of the head. You just have to put your attention there and watch whatever sensations appear. Okay, then you can move to the face. You might be able to feel the cheeks, some warmth in the cheeks, maybe the lips pressing against each other. The chin. Okay, then we move to the neck. Just let the mind rest on that region, letting whatever sensations arise, let them appear. Then come to the shoulders. You can alternate between the two shoulders. Then you come to the upper arms, the upper part of the arm. Again, you can alternate between the right and the left biceps. Then the lower arm, lower part of the arms. Then the hand, including the fingers. Okay, then you come back up to the neck. And then you come down to the chest. And you move down to the abdominal region. You can note the changing sensations as you're breathing in and out, the changing sensations in the abdomen, expansion and contraction. Then you move down to the region, the groin region. Then you come down the thighs, again alternating between the right thigh and the left thigh. Then the knees, then the lower legs, the calves, and then the feet, including the toes. Okay, then you come up to the buttocks, and you could pick up the sensation of the buttocks pressing against the seat. But then move actually into the flesh of the buttocks. Then you take the lower back, again, just rest the mind in that area. Open the awareness to it, and some sensations will appear. Then come to the middle of the back, the small of the back. Then you move up to the upper back, then the shoulder blade, back of the neck, and the back of the head, and then the top of the head. And now you sweep the mind quickly through the entire body, picking up whatever sensations appear, not focusing on individual parts, but just as if you were pouring a bucket of water over the head, and the water quickly flows down the outside of the body. But in this case, you pour the bucket of mindfulness over the head, and it sweeps down through the body quickly. Do it 3 or 4 times, just sweeping down as quickly as you can, or picking up whatever you can. And then you establish your mindfulness in the body as a whole, simply being mindful of the body in the sitting position. You can use a light designation, simply there is the body, or body sitting. But the emphasis should not be on the verbalization, but on your experience of the body in the sitting position. And continue with this bare mindfulness of the body. We'll continue in silence for about 5 minutes. Okay, you can relax now. And usually in my teaching, when we end the meditation session, we end by rubbing the palms together to create some warmth. And we rub the warm palms over the face. And then you can come down the shoulder blades, then to the lower back, and then to the buttocks, and then you come down to the thighs, to the knees, and the feet. Yeah, there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, it's number 119, which has a detailed explanation of mindfulness of the body, different aspects of mind of mindfulness of the body. And it says that when mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, and so on, some of the benefits that can be expected, one is that one can tolerate cold and heat, hunger and thirst, the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, creeping things. One can endure abusive, unwelcome words and feelings arisen in the body that are painful, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, even menacing to life. And so this is an encouragement to develop mindfulness of the body. Okay, we're going to have a little overview since this is an event hosted and sponsored by Buddhist Global Relief. So our vice chair, David Broughton, will give us a little bit of a sort of overview about the work of BGR. So David.
Thank you, Bhante. I have some slides that we're going to use here. If Tricia could bring those up, please. There we go. So the theme, obviously, of this weekend is finding stability in turbulent times. And it seems to me that one of the ways that we find stability is through our practice. Next slide, please. You know, the Buddha recognized that hunger was the worst form of illness. And when people go hungry each day for months or years on end, every aspect of their life is damaged and debilitated. If you've ever visited a third world country and you've seen hunger at firsthand, you've seen the distended bellies of a child, or the doctor has pulled down their eyes and you see the anemia, and you see these children sitting around listlessly, then you begin to realize how pernicious hunger can be. Next slide, please. There are 2.3 billion people in our world who are food insecure, and 333 million who suffer from acute hunger. That means that they will go to bed without food in their stomachs. 3.1 million children will die under age 5 because of hunger. 99 million children under age 5 are undernourished. Sadly, little progress has been made in counteracting the effects of global hunger, or the extents of global hunger. And certainly the pandemic only worsened that. Next slide, please. There are numerous causes. We can't point to just one. Certainly climate change is a big factor. Greed and fear, war, political conflict, disease, economic instability, natural disasters. They all are contributors. But if you look beyond each of these, you can also see that within them, for the most part, we can make a difference. And that hope was really the foundation of the birth of Buddhist Global Relief. Next slide, please. In 2007, Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote an essay titled "A Challenge to Buddhist," in which he stated that the special challenge facing Buddhism, particularly those of us in the West, is to stand up as an advocate for justice in the world, a voice for conscience for those victims of social, economic, and political injustice who cannot stand up and speak for themselves. He also said in the article, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, that our compassion becomes a counterbalance to our inward focus, our development of our minds, and our seeking of liberation. And it actually becomes a natural progression and expression of a truly liberated being. Next slide. So there was a number of us who got together with Venerable Bodhi, and we formed Buddhist Global Relief. We held our first meeting in June of 2008. In August of that year, we were incorporated. By December, we had raised 30,000. I think most of that came from a couple of sources. And by December, we also had funded 4 projects. Next slide, please. Over the years, our mission has evolved somewhat. While we initially focused exclusively on hunger and providing food assistance, we also saw that there were so many interrelated aspects of hunger that we couldn't begin to address them all. So we decided to prioritize the education of children, particularly girls, giving women the opportunity to start right livelihood projects to support their family, and then to train small scale farmers who constitute something like 80% of all farmers in the world, in teaching them sustainable farming and food production, a skill or a technology that becomes even more important in these times of climate instability. Next slide, please. Our core values are founded on compassion, service, prudence, faith, collaboration, integrity, respect, and a global awareness that, whatever we do has ramifications far beyond what our immediate neighborhoods, our backyards. Next slide. We work in partnership with other relief organizations, particularly with small organizations who have feet on the ground, who are staffed by indigenous people, and who understand the complexity and the culture that they're working within. We also work with some large organizations as well. Particularly when we are making an emergency response, we find a well-established organization with a lot of infrastructure and capacity is able to respond most quickly and most effectively. Next slide. As you can see from this map, we work across the world from South Asia to Mongolia to North America, the Caribbean, South America, and Africa. Next slide. I wanted to give you just a couple examples of our partners and projects. Next slide. The Bodhicitta Foundation in India we've funded them since 2015. There they provide a home for girls and an integrated community center where they teach skills and allow these young women the opportunity to perhaps remove themselves from the caste system, from arranged marriages, to find some measure of independence through developing their own businesses and so on. Next slide. The Srada Charity Organization in Sri Lanka provides feeding programs for a number of children in a number of areas. In addition, though, and it's something that we often take for granted in this country, they have a number of pure water projects where they are able to dig wells and then install filtration systems and provide clean water, both for irrigation, but more importantly, for human consumption. Next slide. At the Dhammajarani Wittaya School in Thailand, the school was established for young girls, most of whom are orphans or who are from single parent families, and the mother generally is not able to support them. They're able to come to school, they're able to receive nutritious meals, to learn, they stay at the school, and the school has won just countless awards for the work that they've done among these children, many of whom have gone on to college and now become professionals. Next slide. I'm sure that none of us here today have don't know about the terrible tragedy that is going on in Burma, Myanmar, and what we often don't know is that our the monastic community in Burma is also suffering in two ways. Sometimes there is outright persecution of monastics, and other times because of the devastation that the junta has created throughout the country, the populace are not able to support the monastics in the way that they need, and so we're able to provide additional help, through this program. Next slide. Here are the number of project beneficiaries by broken down by age and sex group. You can see, or gender, I should say, that we've helped over 159,000 people during 2024, and the indirect beneficiaries amount to almost 380,000. Next slide. We also have provided over 300,000 in emergency funding, and this chart tells you where we have spent most of that money. And you can see that it is, again, in countries that have been particularly hard or hit by the pandemic, and then by the inflation that that came afterwards. Also, the war in Ukraine, which has devastated the wheat production and wheat distribution in northern Africa, along with the civil wars and conflicts that have occurred in most of these areas. Next slide. From that $30,000 in 2008 or 2009, we now spend over $1 million each year, almost $2 million, in fact, on our programs. And you can see that our contributed support has made that possible. Next slide. We've also increased the number of programs that we support from the 4 that we initially funded to last year over 50 programs. We did cut back a little bit, but we hope to continue to increase that as programs go offline. We can bring new ones online. Next slide. You can see that 64% of every dollar goes to our program support, 27% to emergency relief, less than 10%, 6% for fundraising, and 3% for administration. Why is that possible? Because first of all, our staff get paid a pittance. They're mostly stipend. Secondly, because of all the volunteers who are involved in BGR, whether it's board members or people who are helping to account for the funds, record the funds, in our IT, our communications, you name it. People like yourselves and me are the ones who are making this happen. Next slide. But I want to emphasize that as much progress as we've made, there's still so much more to do. And I'm sure all you have to do is pick up the newspaper to know what I'm talking about. Next slide. We know that right now the areas of greatest need are in East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, now in our own backyard in Latin America and the Caribbean, in the Middle East, and then in Asia. Next slide. This is one of my favorite sayings, that one should train in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness, generosity, a balanced life, developing a loving mind. By cultivating these 3 things, deeds yielding happiness, the wise person is reborn in bliss in an untroubled, happy world. I would also just add that there is, as we develop our practice, as we walk the path, one of the outcomes of the consequences of that, and one of the first taints to be destroyed as we enter the stream, is this identity view or this burden of self. So and when I started out talking about how that BGR is not only a counterbalance, but an extension of our practice. So as we turn within, we also must turn without. And I think this saying captures that well. The final thought is the Buddha, his last words to his disciples were that, behold now, bhikkhus, I exhort you, all compound things are subject to vanish. Strive with earnestness. And so I hope you will join me in striving with earnestness to not only develop your practice, but in doing so, to also share that practice with the world around us through BGR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. That was very excellent presentation. Really wonderful overview, very well planned out overview about the work of Buddhist Global Relief. And we have to give special credit also to the team, BGR team, that's always been working very almost invisibly behind the scenes. You see little flashes of David and Tricia, but we have to give special credit to our executive director, Kim Behan, who is here. Maybe can we spotlight Kim for a moment? I think Kim deserves a real round of applause. And is Patty with us today?
Yes, hello, Bante.
Patty is here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Kim's assistant is Patty Price. Okay. And is Val here? I saw her this morning. She
Yes,
does our
Bante,
graphic art.
I'm here.
Okay, yeah. All of the beautiful graphics that you see online, that is the work of Val Clark.
Thank you, Bante.
I don't know if Hillary is here. Okay, anyway, we should go on with the program. Okay, so I will start my talk again with the salutation, homage to the Buddha. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. And come back to the theme of finding stability in turbulent times. And maybe each age thinks its own time is the most turbulent period in human history. But I found a verse in the Therigatha. These are the verses of the ancient nuns. And this is verse number 200, which says that the whole world is on fire. The whole world is blazing. The whole world is lit up. The whole world is trembling. So this was some 2,500, 2,600 years ago. And we still find today that the world right now, even one of our major cities, the Los Angeles area, is literally on fire, blazing, and aflame. And so we might say that today we're facing even a firestorm of interwoven crises. And we might see these apocalyptic wildfires in the Los Angeles area as a symbol of our present situation. We have 5 fires that arise at different points, arising almost simultaneously, And just in a day or so, they reduce a large part of the Los Angeles area to cinders. Thousands of homes are gone in just a few hours. Buildings, even historical buildings, have vanished. People have lost all of their possessions that they've accumulated throughout their lives, just turned to ashes, and everything recognizable is destroyed, and just the whole region just collapsed, completely devoured by these wildfires. So on the one hand, this fire in itself is a crisis, but it's also, looked at another angle, the manifestation of a larger crisis, namely the crisis of climate change, or I would call it climate destabilization. And still again, we might see the fire in Los Angeles as a symbol for the interwoven, intricate web of crises that we're facing today. And so what are these crises? And when we put them under a microscope, we can sort of disentangle a number of strands that go into form that fabric. But when I look at them in unison, one of the things that I find most worrisome, most troublesome, is a rising tendency towards authoritarianism, even autocracy, here in the United States, but elsewhere around the world. What's happening is that the old established order of late liberal capitalism, which combined neoliberal economic policies with a reasonably benevolent and helpful social safety net, that particular nexus of factors is falling apart, sort of disintegrating, and giving way to extreme right-wing movements that are putting in place governments committed to authoritarian policies, governments led by parties and that spurn factions and movements that glorify violence, hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. And these are factions that exploit the discontent of ordinary people who are struggling each day just to get by, and turning that discontent, sort of blaming or encouraging the flames of discontent, putting fuel into the flames of discontent, and turning that discontent into hatred and resentment, hatred that is then directed towards vulnerable groups, towards minorities, immigrants, and others who fall into what we might call the underclass, the broad underclass. And this phenomena is rather starkly evident in the United States. And I want to say that BGR is a registered charity. And so I don't like to be speaking on matters with political overtones as an official representative of the organization. So please recognize that when I'm speaking as an individual and not in my position as the chair of Buddhist Global Relief. Yeah, I came to Buddhism maybe in the late 1960s, and I came to it out of what would be called the radical left tradition that was prevalent among many of the university students during that period. And even though I had to put aside my leftist tendencies during my early years as a monk, I now feel very much that they are part of the texture of who I am. And so I have to speak partly out of that tradition. I just don't feel comfortable with versions of Buddhism that look away from the world that are aimed at making us feel comfortable with the world. And I see the political sphere not merely as a sphere where we have campaigns and contests and elections where personalities clash, but I often see politics as the stage where major ethical battles are being fought. The major ethical battles of our time that may well determine what our collective future will look like. Our collective future as a country, whether it's the United States or some other country, as well as our collective future as human beings. It's decisions that take place in the political sphere that will determine whether our country pursues peace and strives to establish peace, whether there's conflict around the world, or whether we commit ourselves to a militaristic policy, whether we launch wars or support wars in other parts of the world, determines whether we're going to spend, as we do in this country, $800 billion, almost $1 trillion on our military, or whether we can use that money for education, for scientific research, for developing new energy systems.
Honey, what world are you living in?
Excuse me?
Sorry, Bhante, someone had accidentally unmuted. I muted them.
Okay, so whether we use that money that's now being used for military purposes, whether we use it for education, scientific research, to provide health care for the population, to support university students and so forth, to develop new energy policies. So those are political decisions, which are, when you look behind them, not only political, but ethical decisions, moral decisions. Again, it's in the sphere of politics that determines whether people are going to have adequate health insurance, or whether they'll be left to struggle on their own when some members of their family fall ill. Whether we're going to have a fair economic system in which everyone can enjoy a satisfactory standard of living, as is the case in some of the North European countries, the Scandinavian countries, or instead, whether we're going to have glaring divisions of wealth between a small, extremely wealthy, powerful elite, as we have in this country, and roughly half the population. In this country, it's said to be like 40% of the population that is either living in poverty or just getting by on low-wage jobs. Whether we're going to have a true democracy in which everyone's voice counts, or whether instead we're going to have an oligarchy in which the billionaires, a small group of billionaires, determine the national policy and the outcome of elections. And again, it's in that political sphere, most important of all for our long-term future, whether we're going to remain attached to the use of fossil fuels, which are destabilizing the climate and straining the Earth's ecosystem, even to the breaking point, or instead, whether we're going to shift to new energy systems that rely on clean and renewable sources of power. So these are just a few of the crises we face today that make this, as we call it, a time of turbulence. And to face these crises, in my view, it isn't enough just to cultivate a purely personal and private base of stability within ourselves, a purely private type of equanimity. And so I would draw a distinction between what we might call private equanimity, or a kind of purely inward equanimity, and what I would call transformative equanimity or effective equanimity. And I think most Buddhist teachers emphasize the more personal approach to equanimity. And so we use our Dharma practice to cultivate the mind that can't be shaken by external circumstances. And then too often we take the attitude that we have to resign ourselves to the idea that, quote, samsara can never be perfected, that the world is inherently imperfect, that we're just helpless to change the course of events. And so all we can do is to protect our own hearts and minds and develop a platform or base of equanimity from which we can't be shaken, a place from which no outer events can knock us down. Of course, it's wonderful to have that kind of invulnerable mind, that strong, powerful, unshakable mind. But if we just cultivate this as something purely for ourselves, that would be too limited and can even lead to a kind of soft acquiescence in systems of domination and systems of oppression. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I agree 100%. Samsara can never be perfected. That's just the nature of existence. And it's true that our own abilities as isolated individuals are necessarily limited. But also, I mean, over the years, my years as a monk, I came to ask myself, and I think we should ask ourselves, don't we have a larger responsibility than merely attaining our own inner security? And so in my view, we have to cultivate along a double track. You know, it's not the case there's a saying that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. We could cultivate our own inner security, our own inner base of equanimity, inner peace, wisdom, enlightenment, liberation. But at the same time, I would say, we have to fulfill our true responsibility in a time of turbulence to develop what I call this transformative equanimity or effective equanimity. And this effective equanimity brings together in a kind of synthesis inner equanimity, that unshakable mind, the mind that's not swayed by desire and aversion, the mind that's not shaken by the lure of pleasure or fear of pain. So it brings together that strong base of inner equanimity, the unshakable, imperturbable mind, with a commitment to effective outer action, with radically transformative action aimed at creating the kind of world in which we would want to live, at shaping the social and economic order in a way that will be congenial or conducive to the flourishing of human beings and the flourishing of all other life forms on this planet. It would be the kind of society that embodies the beautiful ideals expressed, for example, in the US Constitution and in the UN Declaration of Universal Human Rights. And it's also the kind of world that we have expressed in the BGR, and I find it, our vision statement, which I thought I had, but I seem to have lost it. Okay, so anyway, so this would be the kind, well, we should be striving to create, through our application of this mind of equanimity to the work of transformation, transformative action, striving to create a social and economic order necessary to protect this planet Earth, which is the home, the only home that we have, and ensuring that it will be able to sustain flourishing human communities and other life forms long into the future. Okay, I want to come back to this problem that we're facing, the immediate crisis, which in the days ahead, the weeks ahead, the months ahead, are going to throw us into a truly turbulent period. And that is the rise of authoritarianism. And some have said that we're moving towards a fascism. I'm not sure that that is the case, but this won't be the kind of fascism of the classical 20th century kind, but we can see some signs of what we might call a soft fascism on the horizon, or at least autocratic forms of governmental administration. So we have to look into the underlying reasons for this. So what is the underlying causal matrix out of which these tendencies have emerged? And though as a relief organization, we don't take sides in national elections, but I have to say that it's rather disturbing to me that a candidate who based his campaign largely on hatred, implicit calls to violence, and just empty bragging and boastfulness gets to be elected the president of this country, the most powerful position on earth. So what are the factors that give rise to something like this? And there are social analysts much better equipped, more experienced than I am in this area, who have given their own analysis. But these are some of the ideas that I've been able to pick up from them. So I'd say that one of the profound underlying factors is a widespread feelings of social and economic dislocation. That is the sense of displacement, disorder, and disruption in people's lives. So that many ordinary people who are quite good citizens, quite good people in their own right, feel that they are just living at the edge of an abyss. They experience a sense of almost abandonment. They have feelings of increasing isolation, the sense of a loss of social cohesion, the sense that they lack a meaningful place in a supportive social order in which they're treated with respect and dignity. And so many, many people are just plagued by the worry that any year, any day, something unexpected might happen that will cause their entire universe to collapse around them. So the core worries, largely they're economic, but they feed into many other areas of concern. So maybe you've seen your friends lose their jobs, and then you worry, maybe I'm next. Or you're working long hours, very demanding position, and yet when you take all of your expenses out, you're barely making enough to meet your ends. You see the prices are getting too high, rising higher. Medical bills that can be astronomical. The prices of prescription drugs are so high. Food prices, rent, health insurance, all of these are increasing. And it's a daily struggle just to get by. And this problem is just so acute in the United States and probably in other countries around the world. And the sense of economic insecurity feeds into the sense of personal insecurity. So people feel neglected and devalued. They come to think of themselves as, I'm disposable, I'm dispensable. My employer has just used me for whatever work he could get out of me and just throws me aside when he no longer needs me. And people no longer fit together into meaningful communities, but people see themselves in competition with others, in conflict with others, and that their whole value in life depends on how much they can sell themselves on the marketplace, to what extent they can outstrip the other person and get ahead. And all of this, when the people don't rise to the top, don't secure good positions for themselves, when they find themselves treated as disposable, as dispensable, this gives rise to a profound sense of pain, anxiety, inner stress, and then most dangerous of all, it triggers a sense of humiliation, personal humiliation that breeds resentment. And when this resentment builds up, it seeks an outlet, an escape route. And so many, in fact, try to escape by drinking alcohol or using drugs. But another escape route that can be very appealing is to vent one's resentment against others. And so that sense of personal humiliation can give rise to hatred and bigotry, especially hatred of the other, of those who are different. And the difference that marks the person as other might be ethnic, hatred of dark immigrants coming from other countries, who seem to be corrupting and polluting the pure nation with their strange ways, their bizarre habits. Or the hatred could be directed against those who don't conform to the expected sexual and gender paradigms, hatred of gay and lesbian people, and today especially that fear and hatred is being directed against transgender people who have been coming under extremely intense fire from the extreme right, with all sorts of restrictions being placed upon their right to assert and to affirm their personal identity. In many quarters, even women have become the targets of this free-floating resentment. So increasing restrictions are being placed on women's freedom to enter the workplace and to rise to positions of authority, to make informed decisions about their reproductive or career choices. And it's even held that the proper role for a woman is to be a housewife and a mother and nothing more. And there's even one prominent right-wing, what do you call this, influencer, who has said that we should even roll back the right of women to vote. Okay, so these are some of what we call the winds of turbulence that have been blowing through our time, that are shaking up the familiar order. And so what we have to do in facing this turbulent time is not to immediately be swayed by passion, but by responding with anger or with fear, but using the methods of cultivation that the Buddha Dharma gives to us. We have to develop this, what I call this inner core of balance, the core of equanimity, of inner strength and determination. And we have to be able to metabolize the feelings that arise when we confront all of these crises that are facing us today, to sort of digest those feelings, to transform them, and steer them in a healthy and wholesome and benevolent direction. So we take feelings of anger and turn them, excuse me, we take feelings of anger and turn them into a strong moral determination, a strong moral force directed towards implementing what is right and good and necessary. We take feelings of despair and we replace them with a sense of hope. Even flickers of hope are necessary to support us, to sustain us, and prevent us from an inner collapse. We take feelings of weakness, of incapacity, and we replace them with moral courage, with the determination to follow through with our ethical decisions and to pursue them, even when we meet with obstructions, with rejection, with opposition. We take feelings of isolation and we overcome them by finding partners, comrades in the struggle, finding people who share our values, our aspirations, our ideal of a social order rooted in love and the commitment to justice and to the protection of the Earth's ecosystem. And so at the outset, we need a clear sense of the things that are truly valuable. And this is where the great distortion comes in our present day world, particularly in this country. I think what those people, what is sort of billed as the things that are truly valuable are wealth and power. And so as a result, we have this very small elite who's been amassing more and more concentrated wealth, more and more concentrated power, and using those assets just to acquire more wealth, more power for themselves. But when we look deeply into wealth and power, what we see is that wealth is really an abstraction. You know, when you're struggling to overcome poverty, struggling to live maybe a decent middle-class life, then wealth is important. Some degree of wealth is indispensable. But once you get into the multiple of millions of dollars and billions of dollars, the wealth just becomes an abstraction, figures in a bank account, which is not used for any beneficial purpose. And yet it's sort of one of the ways in which ignorance works, avidya works, is by making increasing accumulations of wealth appear to be an end in itself. But that wealth is then used to increase one's personal power, but the power that could be used to bring true benefits to people, to human beings, to this world, is then used to open up more and more access to wealth, to draw more and more assets to oneself. And so people get caught, those at the top get caught in this kind of vicious cycle where wealth is used to acquire power and power is used to acquire more and more wealth. And the result of this is that the entire social order that lies behind them and beneath them gets plunged into disaster, into chaos, into catastrophe. But when we look wisely, the things that are of true value, of true worth, first, I would say the flourishing of human society, the flourishing of human beings under conditions where there is a just social and economic order, where people are able to live together in peace and harmony, to pursue their interests in common, and to share the resources of the wealth, the resources of the earth in ways that will sustain human flourishing equitably rather than lead to the concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few people, while billions have to live at the edge of poverty. And as we saw from these statistics that David showed us earlier, where close to 1 billion people in this world suffer from hunger and malnutrition. So we should cherish the flourishing of human existence on this planet, and also promote the flourishing of the vast diversity of living forms. All of the animals, so many of the animal species in this world are in danger of extinction. The variety of plant types, also many plant types going extinct. So promote the flourishing of the diversity of life forms, and then the vitality of the Earth's ecosystem itself. We see how the wonders of nature can just be desecrated through industrial development. We have the fossil fuel corporations coming to pristine landscapes, exploring for new sources of oil, gas. They discover some sources under the earth, and then they just cut down forests, clear-cut forests, dig up the earth and turn the whole tracts of land just into moonscapes, just to extract types of oil to ship down to throughout the United States, and then ship overseas to burn for power, and thereby to boil the atmosphere of the earth and to escalate the spoliation and the destruction of this planet's vital ecological, biological and ecological system. And so I say that what we need today as part of this transformative equanimity, I say that that transformative equanimity merges with what I've called conscientious compassion. And this is compassion not just as a beautiful emotion, not just as an uplifting meditative state, but compassion that is directed to that task of protecting and enhancing the flourishing of human life on earth in a truly wholesome way. Compassion directed towards protecting the great variety of life forms, and compassion directed to sustaining the beauty and wonder and magnificence of the natural systems in which our lives are enveloped. And so these will be some of my own thoughts on this idea of maintaining stability in a time of turbulence. And maybe we could take a few questions, and I think the way we can handle the questions will be in the same way as we did in the morning. Okay, so I see Samangi Munasinghe, she comes to my Saturday class when I say, are there any questions? Always her hand is up first.
May
Okay,
I ask?
go ahead.
Thank you, Bhikkhu Bodhi. When you said like, it is not enough to, I agree, it is not enough to somehow be very personal, spiritual person. We have to do our part, I guess, to what is happening in the world. That could also be in terms of, for example, oh, I will bike to work instead of driving a car, so less fossil fuel is used. That is also a very personal way of handling, personal way of doing our part for the climate. But on the other hand, if you discuss these things with people who say, not people who are not like-minded, it tends to kind of ruin my own mental well-being. And so how do you balance these two? I do my very I go almost to an extreme for the environment, and I do my own part and I do those things, but I don't go into discussions exactly because it ruins my um, um, sense of peace.
Yeah, I understand that perfectly. And I completely agree with the approach that you've taken. You have to be skillful in determining who are the people that you can speak to, who are the people that, I mean, if people already agree with you, maybe then you don't have to speak to them about these issues.
Exactly.
Okay. If there are people that you think are open to persuasion, then you can speak to those people, even if they argue back, if there's some resistance. But if you think at least they're open to reason, open to argumentation, open to, that you could have a friendly discussion with people about those issues, then you can bring up and try to persuade them. But if you come to people that what's it called? The legendary Uncle Charles at the Thanksgiving table. The person who's not amenable to reason, to argumentation, who's just going to lash out against you or try to argue forcefully against you, then you just maintain your peace and keep that inner equanimity. Don't try to, don't follow the pathway of transformative equanimity if you're convinced that you can transform the other person.
So in that sense, very little can be done by, say, me, on my own, except doing my own part.
No, but you could still, first, you do your own part, and you could still speak to people that you think would be amenable to understanding your point of view, who can, with a little bit of persuasion, can adopt your point of view. But also you can join when you find a particular cause that inspires you, you can join organizations that support that cause. In a way, that's how Buddhist Global Relief came together, just like a few people who are concerned about how, as Buddhists, we could put our moral values to the task of bringing about helping people around the world suffering from different types of exclusion or oppression. We came together without a clear mission. We had some initial discussions, and then we decided to focus on addressing chronic hunger and malnutrition. So if you have some other calling, there can be many different types of callings. People want to protect like animal life, so you can find an organization that supports animals. Or the climate movement, there are various organizations, 350.org, the climate mobilization. There are the larger ones like National Resources Defense Council, the Sunshine Movement. So
Okay.
you just find a group of what I call partners and comrades who share your values, your aspirations, and you join with them.
Thank you.
Okay, see another one. This would be Frida.
It's Freda.
Yep.
Freda.
Freda.
Yes, I'm in Erie. And actually, you and I have a similar background. I am Jewish from Brooklyn, New York. And my sister graduated from Brooklyn College about the same time as you. Anyway,
What was her name?
Linda Tepfer.
Oh, no, I don't know that name.
Anyway, first of all, given that background, I really appreciate you taking a position about what's going on in Gaza. It's just so frustrating, so painful, and I can't even believe that the US government is talking about genocide in Sudan while criticizing people who talk about genocide in Gaza. Personally, I'm involved with a lot of very local things, local elections,
Yeah,
a lot of disability related issues. I had the first homegrown national park garden in the county. So I do a lot of very local things. But the question I had, I was curious, since BGR is a nonprofit, and
yeah,
some of what you were talking about is just sort of almost on the edge of talking about electoral politics.
yeah.
Keep those two things separate, given that there's nonprofits going on.
Yeah, so that was the question or
Yeah.
comment. Yeah, first I said at the beginning of my talk, I said that I'm speaking as an individual speaker. I'm not speaking in an official position with Buddhist Global. I'm not speaking from my position as the chair of Buddhist Global Relief, but in a personal capacity. And then I didn't really get into the political issue, though I said that politics plays an important role, that there are important ethical dimensions to politics in that they determine such issues as who's going to get health care, who's going to be rejected, whether we're going to spend the revenue of the US on military purposes or to promote like education, scientific research, international aid, and so on. So maybe you could say that those are political issues, but I didn't align myself in a political, what is the expression? I didn't align myself with a particular party, particular politician. I pointed out that political decisions have important ethical consequences.
Right. I understand that, and I wasn't saying. I'm just wondering how do all of us who want to be involved. I'm exhausted with reading all these articles about people trying to say what this party did wrong in the election, how they lost and everything. And I don't think that's getting anywhere productive. And I think, you were talking about what are the underlying kind of psychological causes for people being manipulated into, the things that are going on in this country. But how do we actually, without alienating people, how do we do something about that?
I'm not a political strategist, needless to say, but what I would say is that one has to find, again, groups of people with whom one has an affiliation, who share your values, your ideals, your goals, your point of view. Align oneself with them And then in solidarity, there is strength. So that would be, I think, maybe the key is the strength of solidarity, of forming clusters of people committed to protecting democracy, agitating or advocating for greater economic justice, protection of minorities, and whatever issues, protecting the natural environment. So when you form associations with people like that, then you can pursue that goal, your goals. Okay, I think we'll have to take another question. So this will be Alice.
Hello. I was wondering, it's like the same question, but how would you recommend like increasing my confidence? Because I feel like when I have low confidence, I can't have any influence or impact in this world. Like no matter what if I try to solve any global issues, like with my low self-esteem, it's just like sabotaging me in every area of my life, like like yeah, and even for global problems, if I want to make an impact, it's not gonna happen if I, keep basically I can't really get far in life or do too much in life with sort of by being very low. And I think my low confidence comes from like my mom's critical voices that like
You think you had a critical mom? You ain't seen mine.
how did you become so confident? Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's I need to learn from it. And also another question is like how to not feel kind of like in line with like the economic situation. I'm currently looking for a job, how to not feel so desperate in the job search. Because the more desperate I feel, the less likely I am to get one. Because then I become so nervous and uh yeah, and then just
Yeah, I think, okay. Yeah, one of the most effective ways that I found actually in overcoming low self-esteem, I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't really have oppressive low self-esteem, but I would be like nervous and anxious when I had to give talks, when I meet important people, and so on. One of the most important, valuable ways that I found in overcoming that, and it might seem a little bit too easy, is doing the meditation of loving kindness, doing it on a regular basis. And it's not just focusing on loving kindness towards yourself, but developing the loving kindness towards others as well. Because when you build up that loving kindness, that mind of loving kindness, it gives a sense of inner strength. And another thing you could do, and this is not an advertisement or a promotion for Buddhist Global Relief, but whatever resources you have, find some worthy charity. It could be anyone, whatever kind of charitable organization resonates with your own values, your own ideals. And even if it's a small donation, make a donation. And then I'm getting some other voices. Okay, you make that donation, and then afterwards, you rejoice that you made that donation, that you did something to contribute to the good, the well-being of others. And that will give inner happiness. And that inner happiness will nurture a sense of inner strength and inner value. Of course, it takes regular practice, but even 10 or 15 minutes a day of doing the loving kindness meditation, and occasionally as means allow to make that gift and then rejoicing in it. And doing this persistently but patiently. And you'll see, give yourself, say, 3 months, and then look back to see whether you feel and experience more confidence within yourself.
the desperation for a job.
Yeah, that I can't really speak to. That's something I don't have experience in the workplace.
Yeah. Lucky.
Yeah, but you just have to do your best to try to find a job. Of course, it's natural that you'll need a job of some kind.
How would I get over desperation in general in life, like that yearning for anything?
Maybe just think that you have really everything that you need is within you, that you don't have to be desperate to get things from the outside, but what you just have to do is to nurture those seeds of inner strength until they grow and flourish and thrive. And you can do that. That is like the benefit of this persistent practice, whatever kind of practice you do, whether it's loving kindness or rejoicing in generosity. Those are things that give inner strength. And when you have that inner strength, that inner balance, you won't feel that desperation. Of course, you have to seek a job, but do it trying to bring the mind of equanimity to your job applications, that I'm not doing this desperately, but maybe think I want to do this job as a way of form of service to the world, whatever the job might be.
Thank you.
Okay, Patricia, did you have either a question or a question that was fielded to you?
Yeah, I have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
It says, I would like to ask, how does not holding to fixed views fit in the paradigm of transformative equanimity you are sharing?
Yeah, well, I make a distinction between having fixed views and having informed views. So a fixed view means that you've come to a decision maybe prematurely based on one's own biases and prejudices. And then once you form that view, you cling to it with the idea, the thought, this is mine, this is my view, this is what I believe, I'm going to, and then you hold to that view tenaciously, not willing to expose it to the play of facts, to other opinions, to other views. And so that's a sort of a manifestation of clinging. Okay, but in contrast, you can still have a determinate view based upon the information that you've gathered, the different opinions and views to which you've exposed yourself. On that basis, you form a view, which is a kind of expression of your understanding of the situation, but you're not tenaciously attached to that view. So when you learn new facts, or maybe receive counter arguments, or get exposed to other opinions, then you're willing to modify your view, or even to relinquish it and replace it with a different view. So you're open to transformance changes in your understanding. So the view is not based on a kind of personal grasping, but it's a formulation of your understanding of a situation based on the facts, information, and other opinions that are available to you. That would be the way I would understand the difference. Okay, was there anything else?
From the chat, there's one other question that I have here that says, thank you, Bhante, for highlighting the different facets of current turbulences. How can those handful of people be changed in their thought process?
How can what people?
How can that handful of people be changed in their thought process?
The handful,
Um,
that small, extremely wealthy, powerful elite?
That's my assumption. It's not my.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, Bante. Yes, Bante. That is what I mean.
I don't think they can be changed easily at all. What has to be done is to build a countervailing force against them until the point is reached where they can be, through democratic means, deposed from their positions of power. But my assumption, I'm not a prophet, but I believe in the near future that they will be fighting amongst themselves within a few months. Yeah, but it will be virtually impossible to change their way of thinking. It's a very widespread problem in Buddhism, almost to the point where I say, if it wasn't for my strong saddha, my strong faith in the Buddha Dharma, sometimes I've really felt discouraged with Buddhism. The idea that you just turn away from the world and just look at cultivating your inner peace and tranquility. You can develop loving kindness and compassion as meditative practices, but you're not supposed to sort of look out at the world and see what's going on. And God forbid, Buddha forbid, you're not supposed to speak about what's going on in the world. If you do so, somebody will say to you, don't speak about it. Don't talk about things like Gaza. Everybody knows what's going on, but people are troubled about their own inner problems. They don't want to hear this, so don't speak about it. You're disturbing them. They have enough problems on their own. But I think it's part of the task, whatever religion it is, we have to be the voice of conscience for the world. And I don't know if you know, probably you do, of this Palestinian pastor. He's a Lutheran pastor, Isaac Munter Isaac. Yeah, interestingly, I heard him in conversation a few weeks ago. I think he was in conversation with the American social commentator, Chris Hedges. So he made a distinction. He was talking about two types of theology. He said one is church theology. And he said, this is the theology that prioritizes peace and reconciliation at the expense of justice. And he says, in this case, the response to the crisis in Gaza is to pray for peace or even to engage in acts of charity, but not to call out those who are committing injustice and explicitly criticize them for their acts of injustice. And he says, in contrast, we have to criticize this line of thinking despite the elements of good that exist within it. And he contrasts this with what he calls prophetic theology, which means speaking truth to power. Taking sides. Yeah, this is sort of the Buddhist idea, is that you maintain neutrality. Inner neutrality, you don't take sides. But with prophetic theology, which we could give a Buddhist version to this, a prophetic Buddhology, you take sides. So peacemaking means that you take sides. You take the sides of those who are oppressed and exploited, and you stand up for them, and you speak out against those who are committing the oppression, committing the exploitation. In the case of Gaza, those who are committing the genocide. Yeah, so I think in Buddhism, we tend to the counterpart of church theology. We have prayers for peace, acts of charity, but we also need at least a streak of that prophetic theology, being ready to speak out against injustice and to advocate, to speak strongly on behalf of justice. As you could say that justice is putting compassion into action to ameliorate the plight of those who are exploited and oppressed. Okay, maybe I'll have time
Ante,
for...
can I
Thank you.
just add
Thank
one
you.
thing here?
Yeah.
This is Dhammadvipa.
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so what I want to say though is perhaps just adding on to your response there is that you correctly, I believe, importantly mentioned ethics, right?
Yeah.
So in Buddhism, when we think about sila, samadhi, panya,
Yeah.
right? So the perhaps the wisdom is this aspect of the inner development and the sort of non-dual
Yeah.
position. But the ethics is a position that is very clearly saying there is right and there is wrong. There is harmful and there is not harmful, and there's wholesome and unwholesome. And I think that that is where there is really the basis for practitioners to engage with the world in ways that are more active, more direct.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. So what I would say is that traditionally, like ethics would be understood as maybe the ethics of restraint or refraining from unwholesome actions, or engaging in good actions, though on a personal scale. But
Yeah, I mean, but I think also of that sutta, you know, there's that sutta in which the Buddha says, you know, he asks the monks about, is it better the one who speaks about something wrong, right? Or is it better for the one who doesn't speak about something, that to call out something that is incorrect, right? And the monks answer that it's better not to speak, not to criticize, yeah? And the Buddha says, no, it's better actually, right, to speak out when you see the unwholesome.
Yeah, that's very good. That's I hadn't been thinking of that, but that's a very good, right to the point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, I think we're at 4 o'clock, so we're going to have to stop now, and we take a break, and then we come back. Is it 7 o'clock?
Yes, Bhante.
Yes,
Well,
Bhante,
That's Eastern time, 7 o'clock, but for those on the West Coast, it will be 4 o'clock. And you want to definitely come back to listen to these, I call them young monks because I'm 80 years old, from the Redwood Vihara. They're always excellent. Their presentations are always excellent. And so that will be, don't miss them, come back at 7 o'clock. And so let us just end with the very short sharing of the merits. Actually, we do the sharing of the merits at the end of the program this evening. So I will just say, so thank you all for listening, and hope to see you in the evening session.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. It's 9 p.m. here, so I won't see you again.
Yeah, okay.
Good to see you, Bhante, again. Good to see everyone, friends. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.